FMburgh is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
That move. So here are the 5 themes. And let me just hide you guys. So essentially, we have broken down this release because there's so much going on to it into 5 buckets, if you will. So the first one is disaster recovery and business continuity. And then there's a slew of about 30 developer productivity or developer quality of life enhancements in this release. Some stuff that I have been hearing about as long as I've been at Claris, which is 25 plus years now. So we've knocked some of the long-term requests down as well. And we were trying to purposely look for things that are just day-to-day irritants for developers that we could knock down. So we went through a whole list of curating things and getting feedback from the community. Some of the things that you see that we never just got to in the past, we were able to get to this time. And then there's a number of things under the heading of platform stability and support. There's some pretty significant enhancements on the WebDirect front as far as accessibility and people that have to rely on screen readers. And so I'll cover that. And then there's a number of additional things we did in the AI front. Remember, FileMaker 2025 was chock full of AI scripts and calculations and AI model server and so on. And it's not of that nature, but there's a number of things that we put in to continue to advance on the AI front, and a number of them are also foundational to the agentic coding that we're going next. You may have heard or seen the blog post from our CEO, Ryan McCann, at the first part of May, where he talks about the era we're about to go in what we're going to be delivering and how we're going to be delivering it so that you can begin to agentically code or vibe code, which is still floating around, but going by the wayside. FileMaker, both user interface as well as scripts and calcs and custom functions and relationships and so on. So essentially the entire gamut. So there's a number of things that we did in 2026 in anticipation of those coming out throughout the summer, and we'll start releasing them, getting them in people's hands. They're outside of FileMaker. They're going to be plugins and things like Claude Code or S Code and that sort of thing, so that we can iterate very fast. And there'll be 2 different ones that are out there. One for the UI side, very similar to what you see if you have seen Proof Kit from Proof. Very similar. In fact, we work very closely with them. And so that's more the UI side. And then on the scripts and the calcs and the custom functions and so on. So we'll be delivering 2. They'll be staggered probably as they evolve. We get feedback. We'll push them out. Anyone that wants to take advantage of them can be able to take advantage of them. And eventually, as we settle it down, we will package it all up. It'll just be one thing that it's a plugin for the AI tools and so on. Number of the things that we did in FileMaker 2026 are foundational for what's coming next. And yet, in and of themselves, they have a utility. I'll start with disaster recovery and business continuity. And there's fundamentally 2 things that we have done here. We now have the ability to have a remote backup in the cloud. And then we also have a standby server. And so I'll talk through both of those. So first of all, and I'll show you some screenshots. Remote backup is essentially piggybacking off of the backup technology that's available in FileMaker Cloud, which means your on-premise server can now back up into the AWS FileMaker Cloud, which is something that Apple behind the scenes is the one that maintains that through the teams at Apple. And they've done that for years with the FileMaker Cloud. So we're piggybacking off of that so that you can essentially sock away a remote backup into an S3 bucket that is sitting there in cloud, but completely accessible through the interface of the admin console for FileMaker Server. And so essentially what this does, once it's set up, it'll automatically back up into secure storage on every 20 minutes, exactly what FileMaker Cloud does. And the reason this is under business continuity and disaster recovery is it's one of the things that you can do if your server goes down and there's some corruption, or God forbid, there's ransomware and someone has encrypted your access to your files, or there's a physical disaster or even a human error. Someone decided they were going to truncate the table because they wanted to know what it was. You can recover from that. And of course, The reason for that is you may have a backup on the hard drive on your computer. You may have another backup or set of backups that you have on an external drive or some other system. And yet, if they're in the same physical place, if there is a disaster, you may not be able to recover from that. So it's always good to have something that's off-site. So that's what this takes care of. It's completely managed through both the Claris customer console, and that you guys may have gotten an email recently, especially if you're server customers, and a lot of our people haven't seen this, but it's a console that you use to get access to things like FileMaker Cloud. We've used it for FileMaker Studio and Claris Connect as well. Claris Studio and Claris Connect as well. And now we're using it for things like remote backup. And I'll show you some screenshots in a second, but you instantiate your remote volumes in cloud, and then you go into the admin console and you pair them there. And I'll show that, as I said, in a second. And then we do things like validate the backup, expired backups, and redo logs are cleaned automatically. If you're familiar with FileMaker Cloud, it's essentially exactly the same thing. It's just coming through on-prem server. And then the process of restoring is the server admin would download the remote backup and then run the restore and validate the data integrity, and boom, you're off to the races. So if you've not seen this before, this is the CCC or the Claris customer console. And if you have access to this, and more people do, it's where you can go and get your software downloads, where you can download FileMaker Pro. You can download or be sent to a link that downloads FileMaker Go. You can manage users for things like who has access to Connector Studio in your subscription. And there's a tab here called Remote Backup. And Remote Backup here is where you go to set up your remote backup. You can choose the size of the volume you want in your backup. So in this instance, I created a 15 gigabyte remote backup that is called Rick 15G. When I spin that up, it comes up and it gives me a drive ID and a driver key. And those, you can see, have little copy icons there. And the reason is, when I first set it up, you're not going to see an assigned server. What you're going to do is have these keys. You come over to the admin console here, and it's under the Cloud Backups tab of the FileMaker Admin Console in FileMaker 2026. And this is where remote backups are administered. So if I want to register storage that I've set up in CCC, I take those keys, I put them in the interface, and it binds what I set up in the CCC, the Claris Customer Console, to my particular server. And I can bind them and unbind them. I can break them up into different drives if I want to, and I can connect them and disconnect them. And then from there, I've got an entire set of affordances to manage it, just like I would be managing my backups on the on-prem side. And then, of course, when I go over to, so if I set it over here and I only have these set of IDs and keys, nothing over here yet because I haven't come over here. The second I come over here and register, because now I'm taking that storage that as a customer I have purchased, and I'm saying attach it to that specific server. And I do it in the admin console for that server, come in and enter the keys, and then I come back here to see that it has been assigned. The second that I can see both the drive, and there can be multiple of them that I have created, and that it's bound to server, I don't really have to come back here at all. It's just my initial setup, and everything is administered through the server admin console. And I think that the way we have this set up, it's $100 or $120 a year. The initial setup is you set it up, the service, it lasts for a year. We give you 5 gigs in the setup, and then you can purchase additional in increments of 100, and they're the same price. So you can have as many as you want. You can slice and dice the remote backups. And then the next part of disaster recovery and business continuity feature is the standby server. And you may have been familiar. This is something that we did a number of years ago. We ended up ripping it out of the product because it just wasn't stable enough. This is based on significant enhancements to the underlying capabilities of the platform. and some other enhancements that we made that make this far more reliable and stable. But people have had that question. So essentially what this allows you to do is have a second server that's setting on a separate machine that is just setting there. If your primary server goes down, you can cut over to it. So it essentially stays in synchronization with the primary at all times. And how we do that is once it is set up to the admin console, I'll show a screenshot in a second, it does a initial full backup. So that will take some time depending on the size of your solution. And then every 5 minutes, it will take the redo logs and it'll just keep it in sync. So once you get going, there's not much overhead to keeping it in sync. And if your server happens to go down for whatever, this isn't automatic, not yet anyway, but that's absolutely where we're heading. The server admin will have to promote the standby to become the primary. And then what it does in that process, it takes the final logs and applies them before the server went down, and then it brings the service back up. This is supported on Docker, it runs on Ubuntu, it can use cloud VMs, and you can have hybrid sort of infrastructure, a mix of on-prem and cloud. And it's also compatible with Hypervisor Snapshot, and that support is included in the interface as well. So under the connectors tab in the server admin console is a new standby server option as well. And then here's the process. We'll walk you through it. This dialog will say this server is the primary or this server is the standby. If it's the standby, we essentially give you setup instructions and then you walk through and fill it out. So that is disaster recovery, business continuity. It is made up of the remote backup in the cloud and standby server. Those are the only two things in that category. For standby server, I think, and both of these are add-ons. They don't come out of the box because a lot of companies, especially larger implementations, have already solved these in one way, or they have their own backup, offsite backup system. They have their own backup if the server goes down system. And of course, the remote backup is a service running in the cloud, so there's an expense for us to offer that. The standby server, I think, is $500 a year. You go into the store and you can purchase them through that, or you can go directly through the CCC and add those as well. So I'll pause there for this first theme if there's any questions about this. The other thing to know, on the 18th, we have another community live where we focus just on these two things. We have Ryan Manook, who is the product manager, who worked on that. He'll be there with myself and Rosemary, and we'll do a deep dive. Also, if you've been going to FM Training TV, Rich Carlton's daily sessions at 1 o'clock Pacific time, Rich and Jacob Taylor will be covering remote backup and standby server this Friday. I believe it's Friday. And then we will go back on the 18th and jump on the show again like we did yesterday when we launched 2026. So we'll go much more in depth than I was able to do here. But before we go on to the next theme, any questions regarding any of these two things?
Hi, it's Kim. This is great news. I'm using iDrive right now to back it up, if you're familiar with that. I have an external hard drive, but also it goes to iDrive. So I like this idea of this good. And the standby, that's great too, because I remember years ago, it might have even been when I had a 4D server, that you could have a secondary one just to easily switch over.
Yeah, the interesting thing about these, and I think it was a good point yesterday, it's like you hope you never have to use either one of these. It's like insurance, right? You have it in case you need it, where your house burns down, you get in a car wreck, but you hope you never need to use it. It's that sort of a thing, right? But these days and age, especially, one of the primary targets for ransomware are small businesses. And so it's not only the big boys are being hacked, it's everywhere. And my gosh, if you've ever had ransomware on you, it can be devastating. Especially if you don't have a backup to recover from, or your backups, unluckily, were on the same machine.
Yes.
Other questions?
If you don't buy the insurance, you're definitely going to need it. That's the way it works, right?
Yeah, you'll never need to use it if you buy it. But
we actually did get attacked by ransomware at one point, and the only thing that survived was the FileMaker databases. because since they were being housed on the server, for some reason, they couldn't get to the files that were being housed. All our backups were corrupted, but the actual live files weren't.
Interesting. And who knows what they'll be able to do this day and age with AI assisted hacking.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a question too, Rick, because one of the things I'm starting to play around with is just develop my own FileMaker database that uses the admin API. I assume the keys and stuff are those settings that you're able to access via the API, or where does that stand right now?
I'm not sure about the remote backup, but I believe standby server, it could be a remote backup too, because what we usually try to do with the admin API is anything you can do in the admin console, should also be able to do with the APIs. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's both or at least one of them is accessible through that.
Okay. Yeah, it's just like a tool for myself to help manage the few servers that we do have, just so I can keep track of what the settings are. Okay, cool.
All right. I'm going to move on to developer productivity enhancements, or internally we call them developer quality of life. Now, much of the excitement I have seen since we launched is around this area. The interesting backstory is that this entire thing came to life as a result of Ryan McCann coming to full access last summer and answering questions live after he joined us for lunch. And during that, I think Dennis Burnham had gotten up and talked about some developer quality of life things and little irritating things of why is this? For 20 years, this is the default and I always have to change. It's driving me mad. And Becca was saying that. And I had made a comment, stood up and made a comment and Ryan was obviously heard it, about that. I can remember multiple times at keynote presentations at DevCon or Claris Engage, and I'm talking about, hey, here's this new feature we have. And I'm bridging to another feature. And sometimes I'd fill in the gap with a little thing that we did. And almost always I would get so much more applause for that little thing that we did. Then I did the big features. Now, part of it is because if it's a big new feature and you're just trying to get your head around what the heck is this thing, whereas if you did something in the product that removes pain from the day-to-day life of a developer, they immediately recognize it. And if you're familiar with the fable of the boy that removed the thorn from the lion and the lion loved the boy, it didn't eat the boy because he removed the pain, I liken it to that. So because the pain is, you're taking my time. I'm really getting fatigued with having to change this all the time. And the one thing I can't buy is time. So giving you time back is really popular. So I'm not surprised, but I'm happy. And I have to thank John Howell for having the opportunity for us, because a side effect of a comment that was heard by the president of the company, who's when Rich and I were driving him back to the office after that, said, Rick, I want you and Clay to get together and identify developer quality of life things that are low-hanging fruit that we can just knock out left and right. And so that's where it started. So here we are. So
Awesome.
this is not one of them though. So this is under that. This has received some vitriol. Yeah. Let's just put it that way.
A little bit.
There will be an answer to this very shortly. However, so as you may know, we did change the inspector from the 4 tabs that currently are there to 2 tabs that, depending upon what objects on the layout you're clicking on, it will show the things that it's related to and not everything else. So for someone who is overwhelmed by 4 tabs and all the possible options, doesn't necessarily know, probably the adaptive inspector may be a better way for them initially. But if you have the muscle memory for all these things, and you know them quite well, and you know all of the shortcuts, now for not a good reason, you now have this new interface. Now, we did leave, if you remember, it's possible to bring up a floating inspector that is just another version of it. A number of developers sometimes have a second screen. They have all 4 tabs, the inspector open, so that it's always in their interface. So that is still available and still the original inspector. What we're doing in a fast follow update, and I'm expecting that update would probably be either sometime later this month, maybe into July, just give you the option in the settings to decide which one you want to be the default. You'll set it, and then from then on, it'll just remember it. So the default will be the new one. And also the new one is Mac only, because we started on the Mac side doing some refinements. We've got last couple of releases that then we'll probably end up porting over to the Windows side. But if you hate the inspector, then you can get rid of it. Initially, you can just bring up the old inspector, and then soon you'll be able just to set the setting. And this is just a screenshot of the two tabs, the appearance tab and the data tab. And then depending upon what it is you click on, the things that can be acted upon in the inspector are made available. So that's one of the enhancements. This one is, there have been a lot of workarounds over the years to help with this. And now we have the ability just to, by setting a calculation, determine a field entry. So let's say you have some text that is more than fit in the box and it's not apparent that there's more text there and you can't scroll it and that sort of thing. We put in the layout inspector now, you can enter a Boolean calculation and then you can control, okay, is the field editable? Is it read only? And then when it's locked, the user can still get focused. They can copy the text. They can scroll now. And then the interface is pretty straightforward. If you are familiar with the inspector in FileMaker 2025, you didn't have this ability to determine the behavior of field entry that you have now. You can edit it, select only, view only, or you can set by calculation, depending upon who the user. Maybe you want different behaviors. So this is something that people have done all sorts of workarounds over the years, and now we've just made it fairly straightforward, pretty versatile.
I can die now. That's wonderful.
Another thing, people are using more and more custom functions. We put in the ability to organize them by folder, but you lost the ability to sort them in a way that made sense. And so people wanted us to address that. So in this release, we've also done that as well, so that you can do things like sort by name, creation date, or custom order, and it will apply through the folders. I'll show you what it looks like in 2025 and now what it looks like in 2026. And so this is 2025. And so if I've got two folders of custom functions and I sort them, then you don't really get the sorting in the order for the folder. So you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, right? So now in 2026, you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if I click on the function name and sort in the other direction, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just a little thing that was irritating people before, a small enhancement, a developer quality, if you will. This one, I have received feature requests for 25 years for this one. You guys all know this one. Why can I only zoom with those choices? What's up with that, right? So now what we did is, okay, we can still give you those ones. But if you want to specifically say exactly the zoom level that you want, you can use a calculation to do that, to dial it in exactly for kiosk mode or certain size devices and so on. So this is the simple interface in 2025. And this is now the same interface, but with one more option, custom at the bottom, where it just takes a number that you put in a calculation that determines exactly the size that you want it to zoom to. Again, this is something that, the thing is, if you don't have the president of the company saying, do this, what you end up doing is these things never make the cut because you're trying to prioritize stuff and you're always trying to do the things that you think will move it. And you end up forgetting about the day-to-day life of a developer who spends 40, 50, 60 hours a week in, week out, year in, year out, decade in, decade out, who can almost go insane having to constantly have to deal with this stuff. And we had made a definition of, it's low-hanging fruit if a single developer can do it in 1 or 2 sprints, which is essentially one guy could do it in 2 to 4 weeks max. It is so straightforward that they don't need a product manager on top of it. So it's just me and Clay feeding it to them. Clay then just explains to the engineers and they knock it out. I can remember a number of times where I was at DevCon where Chris Krim or Clay Makel, some developer would tell them, ask them for something. They would go to their room and they would knock it out because they had the source code on their laptop in an hour. And then it could take years to get in the product if ever, right? So this was just an open invitation, straight from the president of the company to Clay and myself to keep a hunt out for these things and triage them. And every time we release, in a major release, in updates, we can just pick these things up and knock them out. And there are a lot of them, I can tell you that, into the thousands. So we do some triage, we try to prioritize them, but we'll continue to go down that path. This one's a real sleeper. Jeremy Brown just did an hour on this on FM Training TV with Rick Kalman. Just came out yesterday. We're still exploring this. Jeremy, because he's obviously a big JavaScript person, uses JavaScript add-ons. We originally did this as a follow-up to our JavaScript add-ons because there's this funkiness of having to instantiate a layout to set it up and some scripts, where now we just have created a space where that travels along with the file and survives the closing of the file. It's unlike the other globals. Clay often refers to this as the quadruple $. Behind the scenes, what it is, a Draco table. It's a Draco catalog that you can write into with scripts and calcs, and you can come back from. So Jeremy, and I'll show you some screenshots he used today. Now he's storing his HTML for his JavaScript add-ons that allows you to set, update, and delete these items that are stored in this metadata catalog, if you will. It's an invisible catalog that you can only get to through scripting and calcs to see what's in there, but then you can use the data in there. There's two calculation functions that go along with it. One is you can ask, because you can name these things, and I'll show you in a second. You can ask for it by a calculation, and it'll retrieve what's stored there. And you can also ask for a list of different catalogs that you have that are using for storage. It is scoped per file, although there was some talk about in the multi-file solution how Jeremy said he would use for one of the files and just communicate with the other files to the stuff that's stored. So you don't have to have one for each file if you happen to be using multiple file solutions. And it survives the data migration tool. It doesn't get blown away, so you can upgrade and it'll still be there. It's excellent for storing add-ons and JavaScript modules and things like different variables or settings or version control. There's a number of things that's just beginning to explore the use from it. This one, I think, is a real sleeper and will be leveraged by agentic coding pretty big time. If you're familiar with what ProofKit does and how it does some of the rich UI that's essentially in a web viewer, all that stuff could live in the persistent data store. In fact, you could use artificial intelligence, you could use Claude Code or VS Code to create that. It communicates with the data API or OData, and then it's rendered in a web browser or could be a custom web page if you would. So pretty straightforward. This is the new script step. If we're configuring the persistent data, you give it a name, you give it a unique instant ID, you put whatever value in there, or you can delete it as well. And then here's the two calcs. Get persistent data will return the data that is stored by that name. And then list persistent data IDs will just return a list of instances of entries that you are storing in persistent data. Here's a couple of screenshots from Jeremy Brown's session. The reason I put the date there is once Rich has this up on YouTube, you'll be able to go there and just watch this. But this is a sleeper that is not so obvious. It's larger utility. It's going to be pretty big, right? So Jeremy shows the example is I have this, something I want to store in the catalog, the name widgets. I give it an instance ID that I'm going to set through a calculation, and then the value. And again, he's using variables and things here as well. And then he shows, okay, so if I use get persistent ID for this widget that I call point of sale, that actually in a web viewer is a POS system that he has set up through JavaScript, it is taking that JavaScript that he used to store in an HTML file in a solution. It's now coming out of Draco, speed storage. Think of it as a sort of a fancy persistent clipboard, if you will. So it takes all of that stuff out there and swaps it in. And then this is just an example of using the list of persistent data IDs for all the ones named widget, and then it'll give a list of the ones there. That one, I would encourage you to watch Jeremy's session when it gets rendered. It'll probably be there in a day or two.
Yeah, it was great. And he described those as buckets.
Yeah, it was interesting because it's so new that there was this ongoing discussion, and he's trying to explain it, and Rich is trying to understand it, and Jeremy's going, gosh, I don't know. Let's try this. Let's try that. But this is one that has a ton of utility. We wanted ever since we had the JavaScript add-ons, but with the advent of agentic coding, I think it's got some very interesting future possibilities of the kinds of things that can be done.
Was there any limit to the number of buckets? Because he was saying if you, based on the names, you could didn't check any of the limits, but is there any limit to the number that you can create?
Yeah, I think these are the fuzzy limits. They are so gigantically large that they don't matter, right? It's not like you can have 256 and then you're done with it. I think it's just whatever Draco will, because behind the scenes, you're just leveraging the Draco engine, and those are pretty. So I'm not aware of any built in other than to the point of there's too many. Like they were talking, like you could store how many millions of characters way beyond anything anyone's done. So
yeah, it was impressive, very impressive.
All right. But yeah, thanks. We've done a number of things behind the scenes so that making PDFs much more scriptable. This flew under the radar in ETS and was a last minute addition, but it allows you through scripting now to have almost complete control of what you can do with PDFs. We have dedicated script steps for creating PDFs, opening PDFs, appending PDFs, printing to PDFs, saving to PDFs. It'll support incremental document assembly in a single flow so that you can assemble from different layouts and whatnot and put them together. It'll work on the server side with Perform Script on server. It will work with Get Live Text and Get Live Text as JSON, so you can extract, if it's a PDF that is an OCR and doesn't have text in it, it can extract that and deal with it. And so there's quite a bit of additional capability and automations that you can build in, and robots on the server side and whatnot. So it's really extended that capability. The Save as PDF and the Pen to PDF has been in the product for quite some time, but this is really the first time we've come back and tried to make it as scriptable as possible. And in the agentic AI era, where AI can know about and act upon the capabilities inside the product, the kinds of things you'll be able to do in the future. The other thing that I should tell you is the help system for FileMaker Server, FileMaker Pro, and so on. There now is an MD file for every single script and calculation. The MD files are what AI reads to understand what the capability of a script or a calc or whatnot is. There is also URL that lists all of those, and then they can be accessed by AI so that you can bound what AI will do, which means it won't hallucinate a script step that doesn't exist and tell you to use that. And then when you tell it that doesn't exist, oh, you're right, that was removed in 19. No, it didn't exist in 19 either. It aims to please. It can make things up. The way you control that kind of thing is by telling it exactly what you want it to do based on a .md file. So that will also be the basis of a lot of the stuff that comes with the plugin and the agentic coding stuff we're doing this summer for when you're doing scripts and calcs and custom functions and relationships and so on. So just on the side, you might want to take a look at that. If you're in help, there's a little sort of copy affordance at the top, and that actually copies but you can also get at them through URLs. A number of other things we did that, because I think we did about 30 developer quality of life enhancements here. You can get account password days remaining now. There's a custom dialog scroll bar now that makes it much more nice when you have a custom dialog to be able to interact when you have a lot of content. A real other sleeper here is containers now support the WebP format. So if you've got a bunch of PNGs or JPEGs or whatever, it's about half of the footprint. So if you've got a lot of those, you can save on backup time, you can save on disk space and that sort of thing. And of course, it works across the platform. There's a new ability for replacing field contents there's a new option so you can skip the auto enter option when running as full access so that you're not clubbering things like modification timestamps and usernames. There's the ability to essentially dynamically build strings for ODBC so you don't have to hard code the credentials in, and then you've got to go back and look at it. So it's just scriptable or calculatable now. There are some additional enhancements to the custom dialog besides the scroll bar for being able to control the height and the width and the position and so on, so that you can dial those things in exactly to how you want them to appear and on the device that they're appearing on. There's a nice ability to decide if there's a blank record, where do I want it to appear in the order? There's a new capability if you're using in the web viewer to flush the cookies so that you can reset a viewer session without having to do some workarounds there. You can change the database account password using the developer tool now, so admins can go in and change them without having to open up the FileMaker file in order to do that. There's a new ability to change the default layout view for users. There's a new option in layout options there's an auto save checkbox. View changes would persist without prompting the user. This dialog comes up, user doesn't know what to do with it, so you can suppress that. There is a second argument that can be applied to the get record IDs from the found set that will allow it to carry information about related data and portals by name and so on, so that you can get more versatility when you're dealing with related tables. And then another one that's nice for performance is assert from URL will automatically cache the JSON results for the MIME type that's in there, so that it doesn't have to parse through it every time. There's been some other enhancements we did in 2025 with JSON that made it far more performant. Hamza talked about some of those, and this is just continuing down that path. And I think we've got one more slide here of a few, getting down to the esoteric level for insert from URL for the curl option, a proxy negotiate curl option. I don't even know what the heck that is, but if you know what it is, then you got it. It's pretty esoteric, but someone asked for it. And then finally, schema file options, application settings to disable, enable the default field functionality that we put in a couple of releases ago. So if you want always to have these default fields, there's a setting related to that. So those are the developer quality of life enhancements. Like I said, we've gotten a lot of, in the last 24 hours, a lot of excitement just for these alone. You can see some of them are just longstanding irritants, and we've just begun. The next list we're working on took a little bit longer to do this one. It's probably not a low-hanging fruit as much as, but we're cranking it out, is to be able to just set the defaults yourself on like scripts. If you're saying, why is this always a default when I always do that, you can change them yourself. You can control them and they'll be sticky. So that's developer quality of life. Are there any questions, comments about any of these?
I just wanted to say thank you, because there's quite a few I could use.
Rick, is that simple question, or really the custom dialog scroll bar, is that intelligent enough to know that if it doesn't need to have scroll, then it doesn't show the scrolls?
I don't know. I would imagine that it does, but John, I don't know if that was you, John. I think I recognize your voice. Yeah, I don't. I can't see you. I can see Teresa, and that's it. Yep, I'm not sure. I would expect it to, but don't know.
And Dennis and I spent some time together. He was telling me about some of those things that he submitted to you that you cured on. Considering now that there's a bigger ear for feature requests, who do we go to make sure they get heard in short order? Because in years past, I've mentioned things that changed. So who do we talk to?
Best direct way is either directly to me or directly to Clay, because Clay and I are working together on this. We have an internal team, Clay and I, and someone from support and someone from product management. We meet, we collect these, we curate them. Clay goes in and triages them to see if they are low-hanging fruit or not, because not everything is something that a single developer with not a lot of hand-holding from PM could do in 2 to 4 weeks. But there are hundreds and hundreds. When I was a product manager over the years, I had collected, I think, 26,000 feature requests, and they were all over the product. And any given release, you can only knock out so many, so you can never get to the list. It's so large. So we came up with, let's come up with a way of prioritizing these. The initial set, we had 1,500 developers weigh in on what they thought the priorities are. And then we just started knocking those ones down. So
Maybe I've got a couple. Maybe I should just sit on until full access. Talk to you guys about it.
yeah, we get Ryan to show up for Q&A and mention him again and then put another fire under him. But no, Ryan's thrilled because his thing was this. I want to knock these things down because I want to send a message to our developers that FileMaker is every bit much still alive and we care about developers, right? And so it was important to him not only that we do this, but we let developers know that we're doing this. And of course, it opens up the floodgates, but that's good. We have a process for it. And so far, so good. It's working.
Great work. Thank you for all this.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. These are the things under platform stability and support. Oh, there. Someone had a question or comment?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
First, just reading through some of the stuff for the PDF script steps. It sounds like we can now take a PDF that was maybe created by some other thing, as long as FileMaker can find it, then we can actually append to that PDF from something in FileMaker, or does everything have to still be created by a FileMaker process?
I don't think it has to be created by a FileMaker process because you can get the text out of OCR text documents. But it's a good question. I don't know, Todd, if that was you. I recognize your voice. Yeah. Something to be experimented with. If anyone was in ETS or has tried this already in the less than one day that you had it, know the answer.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'll just have to experiment. And then the other question was for the persistent data store. It sounds like typically you would use the script step once unless you needed to change the information that's being stored for a particular bucket. And then functions would be what would be reused regularly, correct?
You use the script step to instantiate it, put it in the bucket, or to remove it from the bucket, right? And then you use the calc to extract when you want to use it by name so that it knows, okay, that there's a persistent data store that's associated with this file, and this is its name, and then it has content in it, and then it's going to pull that. So you don't have to have, you think about add-ons had to have layouts to set them up. Or you're using JavaScript and web viewers, and you had a table where you were storing the HTML. And so you've got these tables hanging around, and they're in your relationship graph, and they're just for the feeding what it is you want, or you've got user settings and that kind of thing. Now they just exist out of your view. And it's one thing is you can't see them, right? So there's some advantage if you want to put them in a table, but you can get at them, right? You can get at them and see what's there.
All right. Thank you.
All right, platform stability and support. We now have the ability to run multiple SASE processes concurrently. There's some settings that in the admin console that you can use to determine, because sometimes, for instance, you see this last one, you can limit it to one if you have a plugin that requires a single process mode, but they're no longer stacking up. So if you have a lot of processes that are running that are using this, they can run in parallel, and it has a dependency on the amount of hardware and stuff you have. The server admin console will help you to understand how many may be usable. This is also something that is foundational to the agentic coding era, where you may have a number of agents just requesting things through the data API of server. And so you don't want the bottleneck. They're stacking up behind each other. You got to wait for each one to come out. So anyway, there's nothing to show you. It just automatically happens. So you can control the bit through the admin console. And it's just like some of the other things that we want that we've done in the last several releases, from essentially a single process. Our machines have tons and tons of capability. Why would you just have one process? Anyway, that's that one. Another one that also is important for the agentic era, when agents start to do work on your behalf, is, and especially with what's going on with some of the user interface things that leverage the web publishing engine or OData or the data API, if those go down, someone has to tell someone to restart it, right? And they got to find the administrator. Now, when you're relying on these things, and more when agents are running in FileMaker, and it goes down, mucks up the whole system. So now these services just restart themselves. if they happen to go down. We will still log in the logs so that you know that it went down so that you can troubleshoot it, because why did it go down? But these are stateless, so it can be restarted with the database without having to stop the server and so on. So we just make them self-healing, if you will. So under heavy loads or happens to go down, or you're just trying to make sure you get as much performance and reliability out of things like WebDirect, or you're using OData to feed BI tools like Tableau or something, and people are using it all the time. Rather, a service can go down. It could be a while before you could find the server administrator and they go and turn it back on. So we just decided we'll have it to be self-healing. Another simple but powerful thing is that you can now export field contents on server, which, believe it or not, you could not do before straightforwardly. And there's really not anything you need to do. If you're aware of the affordance in the script workspace, where there's the icon or the list that'll tell you, hey, what's server compatible, what's compatible on Go, and so on, you can see in FileMaker 2026, export field content when I filter on server is not grayed out anymore, right? So now you can do that. The implications of these sort of things for what you can do on the server side, because you now have the ability to do this straightforwardly without having to go through shell scripts or some other workaround, are pretty significant. And I'm sure AI will be playing with stuff as well. There's a number of enhancements we made to FileMaker Go, besides the fact that almost everything we do in 2026 also applies to FileMaker Go. So sometimes people are just looking for specific features, and it's like, it does everything. WebDirect, Go, do everything that Pro does, with certain caveats. There's certain things that you just certainly can't do on these devices. But in addition to that, just for Go, there's a flash or torch option that allows you to turn on the light without having to manually do that in places where maybe you're doing barcode scanning in the warehouse and it's low light environment. There is a error-based, and the error is the Emperor's error, an error-based calendar system in Japan. We actually had to VREV our product a number of years back when the Emperor changed, but we couldn't do it until we knew who the Emperor was going to be. So we had to sit on it. As soon as we knew who the Emperor was, we updated that for Japan. And so that is now supported in FileMaker Go as well, because it wasn't supported. There's a couple of things related to window UUID in selecting window and getting the UUID that gives you more control when you're on iOS devices, when you're trying to target specific windows, that is more precise and that sort of thing. Talks about building multi-window Go workflows, and scripts need to reliably target the window by identity so it doesn't accidentally act on another window. So those are some of the enhancements we made there. There's a number of platform and security updates, updating the OpenSSL to 3.5 LTS. Those continue to advance, updating Tomcat version, having the Windows Server 2025 is now a certified platform we run on. Made some enhancements to IPv6, that there were some funkiness there. And as we're running out of IP addresses, IPv6 is becoming more and more prevalent. So we've made some enhancement there to continue to support that going forward. Of course, we support the latest Mac operating system. Golden Gate was just announced on Monday. It'll be in beta through the summer. It's going to come out sometime in the fall. Our intention is to, obviously, as we always do, support that. It's a little bit more interesting this time, because if you were watching the WWDC keynote, Apple is finally making its play with AI, and it's everywhere, right? And it's pretty darn powerful. And it's in a way that you would expect Apple to do it, rather than creating their own foundation models and charging for it and spending billions of dollars to do so and build out data centers for that. They just decided to write off these other models. Eventually, this will morph into some very interesting things that are coming down the pike. If you watch the platform State of the Union that was in the afternoon after the keynote, where they talked about, for instance, now Xcode can take advantage of agentic coding, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I can't wait to see what people do with Xcode and iOS App SDK when they have agentic coding to assist. And I'm imagining they'll probably even be able to crank out, dare I say, FileMaker Go for Android, because AI can assist in there, and it's so powerful now. But a lot of stuff going on there. Some enhancement to FileMaker Server to specify users on Ubuntu that gives you a little bit more control over the environment, especially if there's strict account policies. So we're trying to dial in there. And then we've made some enhancements to the assisted install tool. Now Server can install the developer tools through assisted install text. You set up the option. And if you just want the CLI or command line developer tools, which when we get into the AI section, I'll tell you why that becomes more interesting, then you can get them that way as well. Any questions on platform security updates or the stability and support section? All right. User experience and accessibility. This is fundamentally some enhancements we made to WebDirect. Probably the biggest one by far is WebDirect is a heck of a lot better now at taking advantage of screen readers and actually making it usable for people with visual disabilities that require screen readers. This is something that if you receive government funds, federal funds, if you're an educational institution, if you're a nonprofit, there are requirements to provide accommodations to your users, including with software. And it's always been fairly horrendous to try to use screen readers for things like WebDirect because you really want it to be in a logical fashion. So we've done a lot of work there to take advantage of this. We're following I don't have it here, but a WAG, I think 2.1 standard that gets evaluated by screen readers, and we'll keep pushing down that path. And there's not a thing you have to do to your files. You just go into the admin console. There's a new thing under web publishing for enabling or disabling accessible keyboard navigation. And then it just turns it on. So someone who's trying to use a custom solution that's deployed in WebDirect with a screen reader will actually be able to use it in a logical thing because it's essentially reading to them, and it has to do with tabbing and what it says, and not only what's in your file, but also what's in the menu bar as well. There's been pretty significant improvement there, something that a lot of the higher educational institutions have been pressuring us for a number of years. So that's in the product now. And then there's a number of other things that we did in WebDirect, including updating JDK 21, because essentially what happens a lot is that larger organizations that have IT departments that then scan the network will flag older frameworks, even if, because of security vulnerabilities, even if FileMaker is not subject to those CVEs or vulnerabilities because you don't take advantage of it, IT doesn't care. I want it off of my system, right? Sometimes people aren't able to use WebDirect because it's using an old version of JDK. We're opening up the database that's more supportive of IPv6 addresses. There was some funkiness where it would render a blank page, and now it works as you would expect. They've made some enhancements to how we deal with cookies, including same-site attributes, which prevents cross-site request vulnerabilities that could impact the session cookie. Sort of esoteric, but you run into this stuff and it impacts the deployment or the functionality of it. And then there was this funky 1 to 1.5 second freeze when tabbing over popovers that we've addressed as well. So just making that a better experience. I think we got one more thing. I already talked about this on the Go side of the house. And let me actually fix this slide since I can do that. And that's the Japanese calendar. So I won't go into it again. Any questions about the accessibility or the other WebDirect enhancements? Okay. And last but not least, I will cover some of the additional AI architecture things that we've done in this release. And again, remember, if you have seen and heard, watched our webinar on the 28th of May about where we're heading this summer with agentic coding, a lot of these things are foundational for where we're heading next, and they're usable in and of themselves without any additional use of things like Claude Code or Cursor or VS Code and whatnot, but certainly they can take advantage of those as well. First one, this is a very interesting and powerful one. So the field annotation is a straightforward way of being able to say, this field is intended for this purpose. And the reason that's important for AI is, let's say that you have a very funky naming convention because you want certain things to sort certain ways. And AI looks at that and goes, I have freaking no idea what this thing is. It tries to guess, it gets it wrong, it hallucinates, right? So now you can say, this field is for this purpose. And essentially, it informs AI to be much more knowledgeable about what this field is, what its intent is, so they can use it more reliably. There are some very interesting side effects of having done this. We get out of this a thing some people have been asking for quite some time: friendly field names, believe it or not. So here is the UI. So if I am in a field in the manage database and I click on the advanced option here, it will bring up this ability to add my definition that's going to go into the DDL that AI can read. Okay. But you also see this tick box here that if I click that, then I can specify using JSON what name I want to use that's a friendly name for my field. So if I have some weirdly named naming convention thing, I can keep that in my system, but I can then give it a friendly name in the UI, or when I'm exporting it, say to Excel, when I'm sorting and that sort of thing. So it's much more friendly to users. It can also, because it's available by Calc, you can now, if you have a solution that's multilingual in different languages, it happens a lot in Europe, then if you're on an Italian system, you can have it show the Italian label. If you're in the French system, the French label. So this thing has a lot of versatility built into it. And by a side effect of giving something AI needs, we're able to actually solve for friendly field names as well. So I think this is going to be a big one. Similar is base table comments. For the same reason, you have a table of data in it. You're giving AI access to it, and you can tell AI, this data table has this type of data, it has my invoices, it has my products, it has my customers, whatever that may be. And you're explaining to AI what that table's for. So when AI, because you're using natural language query to ask it of something, and the more precise it can be about understanding what the target is, the better it is of being accurate. So this is pretty straightforward. It's just a new calculation function that base table comment, give it the file name and the base table name, and then it can read out of that so that AI has a better chance of, when you're using something like Claude Code and you're using the plugins that we're coming out with this summer that allow you to interact directly into the FileMaker database, then, and you're querying it, or if you're using our MCP server to interrogate it, then, and with natural language, you're able to control far more precisely the results you're going to get, because AI is much more knowledgeable about what these fields are. It doesn't have to guess because you can tell it what these tables contain. So it has a much better chance of getting things right. Also, for foreign key syntax in FQL, if you don't know what FQL is, it's essentially FileMaker query language, which is essentially SQL, right? So we translate FileMaker so that SQL can understand it. But because of this change, you're also essentially able to agentically code or vibe code relationships as well. So that, think about SQL query by natural language, or a lot of times people will do things with SQL because you can declare a relationship without having to put it on the relationship graph. So this is, again, one of those things that LLMs or agentic coding tools will be able to take advantage as well. Then another one. So as we've been doing save as XML for a while, we've made pretty significant advancement in the kinds of things you can control now. And also you can use the FileMaker or solution upgrade tool to be able to work with the XML. So, FileMaker is expressed in XML. So you can output XML. You can get a big old, massive XML catalog that then if you wanted to use AI to help you change things because you want to push them back into FileMaker, and it parses through that, it can be daunting, it can take time, it can chew up tokens. So what we've done is we come in now in FileMaker 2026 with save a copy as XML, and you can select which catalog or catalogs you want to output. So if you just want the fields, you'll just get the XML for the fields. If you just want what's in persistent data store, it'll push that out. If you just want scripts, table occurrences. And so this is important because you can output a certain XML that represents the catalog for, say, your scripts, your calculations. You can then use an AI tool like VS Code, which is pretty good at parsing things like XML, JSON, other things, or Claude Code. And you just can target that. You can ask it to make the changes, you can inspect it, and you can push it back in to FileMaker. And essentially, it's serialization and deserialization of FileMaker files into XML. I'll talk about that, the other piece of that in a second. You have much more fine-grained control. Also notice that there's a tick box here or a checkbox that if you want to use these because you have an analysis tool like Inspector Pro that you want to take advantage of, that it can read that stuff as well. You can use it for version control and so on. We've made some additional enhancements. We've added Google Gemini as a model that we support along with OpenAI, and I think Claude was another one. I can't remember all the ones we support, but we didn't have Google Gemini. We've added that. And we've also made some improvements to RAG. RAG is essentially the ability to take a document, a PDF, use that as your knowledge base, point to that when you query it with AI so that it's not going out to the internet and scraping the entire wealth of human knowledge and guessing at what you might have intended. You can say, this is your body of knowledge to look at and derive all of the things that you return based off what I have here. And I've already seen developers before this feature, because obviously we have RAG already product, put their health documentation there that allows their customers just to search with natural language and has access to all of their help for their SBA solution or whatever. So some of the improvements that we made to RAG. So if you go into the server admin console and the AI services tab that was introduced in FileMaker 2025, and you enable RAG, then you get all of these settings that you can control. You can even import RAG spaces so that if you have different documents on different servers or drives, you can bring them in if you need to use them in your solution. And it even goes one step further in that it also includes an affordance to be able to take the RAG environments you've set up and right within the admin console, be able to, with natural language, ask questions of it right within there. So it's almost like a chat interface in the admin console that's pointing at those things that are stored in the augmented retrieval PDFs, whether documents that it can read from. That's some of the enhancements that we made in those regards. This is the other part of the creating a .fmp12 file through the solution upgrade tool. Using the patch for that tool to be able to do what I said is to essentially get XML out of FileMaker, act upon it in some way using AI in some tool like Claude Code, and then pushing those changes back in. Now, this will be on steroids when we introduce the AI and the agentic plugins this summer, but you can already do this now in FileMaker 2026. In fact, Danny Mac and Ivan, I think, or Igor, I can't remember which one, in ETS already were using what we built in with the Save as XML and this capability to be able to essentially instantiate an entire FileMaker Pro app directly from XML, which could be written with the help of AI and bring it to life. And so what this means is that the solution upgrade tool, if you see, you can have the ability to patch files in code into the solution, infuse it. So pull out, say, a script that you want to modify, use AI to modify it, validate, that's what you want, and push it back into the solution through the solution upgrade tool. We're making some additional enhancements to make that tool have the ability to act upon a file that's live. And the reason that's important is right now, you've got to take the XML, you've got to paste it, act upon it, and then paste it back in. There's different clipboards for different XMLs, depending upon what you're doing. Everyone who's trying to do this stuff is going around those and using plugins for the clipboard or different techniques. And this is just straight through. You don't have to worry about any of that. You can just use the tool. The good news is, if you are not comfortable with command line interfaces, and most FileMaker developers are FileMaker developers because they don't want to do this kind of thing, AI is extraordinarily good at CLIs. Claude Code is just a CLI, but it is super intelligent. It's like chatting with it. It's no problem at all for it to do these kinds of things. When we're pushing updates into the files using tools like AI, it's just going to push them through the solution upgrade tool. And so anyway, that's a pretty big deal. AI model server, we made some additional enhancements to that. I talked about some of them with the Ragspace enhancements and more control over the models that you can download. The thing about AI model server to understand is it's the trade-off you make if you don't want to take the data that you have in FileMaker or proprietary information, send it out to one of these foundation models on the cloud, where you have the potential of training and providing that information to the entire world, and you want to control on it. The way you control that is you run the model locally, but that requires a lot. That's why NVIDIA is such a successful company now, because they make GPUs, and GPUs are very good at number crunching, and that's all AI really is how close is this number to that number. And if you run these models on your own hardware, then you're not sending it out anywhere. You're in complete control. The other thing you get, because people are looking at going, oh my gosh, could be expensive because I want to run a big model and I need double the size of the models, 40 gigabytes. I need at least 80 gigabytes of memory and that sort of thing to be successful. It always should be on a separate box. But the thing is you also then save the expense of tokens, because when you're using these foundation models in the cloud, you're paying for tokens, right, through some program or not. And you might have heard there's some companies who have been surprised with bills of $500 million because they had no idea they were chewing through tokens. I've also heard now that companies are hiring entry-level people to save on the cost of tokens, believe it or not. Ironic and funny, if you will. However, when you factor in, is it worth paying the $7,000, $8,000 for a separate box to run my own AI models, factor in that token cost as well, or the fact that you're not sending data out. But that's also a pretty powerful capability. This is AI services again in the admin console, and then model server. This is where you go. You see, I've got a model server running. It'll direct you to Hugging Face, where I believe there's well over 1 million models now out there, everything in the kitchen sink. The thing about Hugging Face, it's all open source. You can pull them down. These models do a lot of different things. There's smaller ones, there's larger ones. So you can experiment with as small of a footprint model that will give me the results I want. So sometimes that is a lot smaller than pointing to some gigantic foundation model. And then on top of that, there's more and more movement towards very specialized, much smaller footprint models that do a particular thing particularly well. And that'll probably end up being leveraged by Apple and so on, because you're on devices, you only got so much space. So you don't need a model that knows everything that ever happened on the internet forever. You don't really need that if you're doing something very specific, and you can have a model that knows all about that domain, which is orders and orders of magnitude, obviously much smaller than all of the crawled internet. And I'll take questions there, but I also wanted to say, make sure that you visit the tech specs. It'll tell you anything that's changed. I can get to it, iChart here. And Todd, I'll be more than happy to give you this deck if you want to distribute it. But you can just go to our knowledge base and just ask for the FileMaker 2026 technical specs, and you'll get a long HTML file of that as well. So any questions about the AI stuff that I shared, or any of the other things I covered? And I did a lot of talking, so I apologize. There's a lot to cover.
So you ran out of material, only 63 slides. Hey, Rick, there was a session I was in, whatever it was yesterday. I'm losing track of them all. It was Richard Carlton's podcast. And somebody asked the question, what's the backward compatibility of server 26? And somebody said 2 versions. But I looked on the technical specs on the website, and it says it only goes back 1 level to FileMaker 22. Could you have a comment on that?
Yeah, and I saw that comment, Bree. I think you sent me a chat. I think both are sort of right. And the reason is the last version, I think 21, because of some security thing, we supported longer than we would have normally. So I think that they went back and forth because our official policy is the current version and 1 back. And depending upon, because also it's like a 2-year. So sometimes we're support 3 for a while, then we'll drop 1 at a certain time of the year. I think it goes a little bit further back, but they went back and forth on that.
Website right now, as I read it yesterday, only says it only supports back to 22.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that might be the official word, but it actually may go back a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes what we say we support and what we block are not necessarily the same.
Like a grandfather clause or something.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe the internal discussions about that went back and forth. And back and forth.
I would. This is awesome, man. This is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, the combination of what's in this release and then the stuff coming is mind-blowing, right? And I don't think any of us know where this is heading, right? Because a lot of the stuff that we can do now has only been possible in the last few months because these models got a year ago, people were trying this stuff and it was just, forget it, right? It's too stupid. It hallucinates too much, right? And then something happened in January, these new models, and all of a sudden, all this opened up. So imagine every year building on the year before, you got this curve that's exponential. So I don't think anyone knows. All we know now is all software development, and it's not just FileMaker, has been changed forever. But what we're beginning as we get more and more mature in this space, realize is it's one thing for some guy off the street to tell it to build an interface and it looks gorgeous. It's another thing to deploy that in a mission critical business where you have to rely on it and where that person has no idea that iceberg that they're at the tip of it and there's a giant thing underneath. And that's what FileMaker developers have done forever. So it's really the missing ingredient in AI is your knowledge. And the power of you paired with this essentially just allows you to be more productive, do things that maybe your customer wanted, but they couldn't afford because it would take you 1,000 hours to put it in there. And maybe now you can do it in 10 hours. You can give it to that customer, right? And it's not going to cost as much, which helps you to retain that customer. There's a number of opportunities. The other thing is these tools like Claude Code and VS Code allow you to encapsulate your knowledge into the skills. You can tell it who you are. You can tell its best practices. You can tell it, give it the guardrails. It'll fight with you. It's still out there where you've got to corral it. But once you corral it, you just don't go back. And it's just so powerful. And Rich started 4 weeks ago, started with Claude Code, because even if you use Claude Desktop or Chat GPT, you're just chatting and asking. You start moving to these CLIs and it starts doing stuff and you get hooked, right? And so the problem where people are getting obsessed and addicted to this stuff and coding at 2 a.m, which I don't think is the healthiest thing in the world, obviously, but they can't stop it because it's so. I don't think we know the outer boundaries of where this is all heading. All I know is that if you're a seasoned, talented developer who understands how to get requirements from customers and deliver to them what they're looking for and something that will actually run, it needs you badly. And we'll have materials coming out this summer that'll walk people through all these things, introduce them to the power of these tools, the MD files, the skills, that you can put in, the things that you can bound it to, the projects you can run. It's a whole new different territory, and it's still familiar. You will recognize it as a FileMaker developer. You might not recognize some of the stuff they're talking about in vibe coding and Joe Blow, go out there and create something. But the reality is underneath all that, it still you need to be able to deploy it. You need to be able to secure it. You need to be able to determine who gets access to what, where the data is going, all of that stuff. AI doesn't give you that right now. Maybe in a few years it will, but it doesn't right now.
Well, you mentioned Danny Mack, and I think you meant to mention Ivan Granger, Rick.
Yeah.
He's going to be at Full Access talking about his work on AI.
Yeah, Danny blew me away because he sent me an email going, look what I figured out how to do with what you guys did in ETS. And it's OMG.
Yeah.
And Danny's always been a smart guy. And I don't know Ivan, but I'm assuming Ivan's pretty smart. But,
Nice.
and now Codance and Full City have hooked up. And so I'm expecting another powerhouse out there.
Indeed. A great presentation.
Yeah, it's interesting presenting this stuff not as the product manager who worked with the engineers for years to put it in there, because all I can do is now say, here's what we did, but I can't drill down and say, and here's a nitty gritty little thing. So it's a little bit different for me, but I used to do this anyway as the director of PM, and I would be the one articulating just like I am now. Obviously I can still do that, but I don't have to sit down with engineers and determine where pixels go. So that's nice too.
Thank you, Rick.
Sorry, I was just saying I was excited to use this because so many things. I've created a reporting database to do exactly what those field annotations are doing to make it user-friendly labels. And then I an OBDC plugin, I bring down the data, put it in Excel, and then I tell Claude to analyze it and give me a dashboard. And that's what I've been telling everybody is where you need to know what data you want for AI to give you what you want. So there are so many things in this presentation that I was like, oh yes, I'm going to be using this. So this is exciting.
Yeah, it's a real sleeper. It's funny because I immediately understood the implications of it because I've done every single release since 8.5. That my first feature was a web viewer object. So that's 19 releases behind me. So I've got a little water under the bridge for that. And I looked at this thing and said, this is a great release. And then I have some people that don't know it. Oh, it's not very sexy. It only has remote backup and standby server. It's contrary. I think I was right.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Todd. And I will send you the deck, Todd, so you have it if you want to distribute it. It's fine. It's nothing there that's not, it's nothing there confidential at all. It's out. So if people want it as a reference, then I'll send it your way and you can distribute it.
That'd be great. And I guess just so that I don't bombard people that do not want it, if you just want to shoot me an email saying, please send me the slide deck, then I'll make sure you get it as soon as I get it from Rick. And I guess I know we're a few minutes over, but if you guys don't mind hanging around, I got just a few wrap up slides to go through here quickly. Anybody have one more thing? I think Rick has given many things, so we probably don't need one more thing. Announcements. I don't know if you knew this or not, but Claris FileMaker 2026 is now available. Yeah. I couldn't resist putting that announcement in there. And I remembered correctly that it was 100 plus new features and then 100 issues addressed. So I remember from yesterday. Rick had already mentioned it as part of his, but the Claris Community Live events are continuing through June. And the big one is on June 18th, which is specific to the remote backup and standby server features. You can watch replays of any missed Community Live events, and it's all there on the community.claris.com, where you can check all of that out. And then the last one is, we made this announcement last month as well, but it's probably worth reading if you haven't had a chance to check it out, was how Claris is building for what comes next, which is the message from Ryan that he shared back in May, leading up to a lot of what we saw tonight and where things are headed into the future. Our next meeting, which is the August meeting of FMburgh, is actually in July. We're moving it up this week, or this month, we are a week later. Next month, we're going to, or for August, we're going to be a week earlier, because we normally skip our meeting in July because it's usually right around the 4th of July. But we're going to go ahead and go on July 29th because the Wednesday in August will conflict for those traveling to attend full access, which everyone should be traveling to attend full access.
Yay.
And you're good to hear from me. I'm going to be selfish because I'm doing a presentation at full access. I'm going to be talking about new stuff. And so that's going to be my practice session. At least that's the plan right now. So that's what's happening there. Important dates to remember. Full access runs August 6th through 10th. out in Los Altos, California. You see the website there. John, do you have anything that, since you're still with us, that you want to add beyond just what I've already mentioned?
I posted a bunch in the chat, and let me see if there's a few that are worth reading. People are signing up every day. We had 2 sign up today, so we're probably going to sell out before August. The price goes up on the 4th of July significantly because we're trying to push people to sign up early, because adding people to the last minute is a real pain in the butt, right? We have to have facilities for everybody. We have people coming from France. We have people coming from Germany. We now have people finally crossing the border from Canada. So that's a big win, because everybody was like protesting the US. And Christian Schmidt's going to be there for sure. We're working on getting Bruno Pelletier from Quebec. I think he's going to come. Price is right now $14.95, and I think we can get you a discount coupon if you're interested in it. There's always some discounts available. Lots and lots of sessions, a lot of AI stuff, but from every angle you can imagine. There's even going to be some skeptical AI stuff, so we can see the bright side and the dark side and not just drink Kool-Aid, but really looking at it seriously. And some of the biggest players in North America are going to be there in the session, along with a lot of just common developers, which we welcome everybody. We are working on our 2027 location. I can't give it out because we looked at 2 of them and I changed my mind because of elevation issues, but we have a very cool spot lined up for October. It's like the second week of October in 27. We're already planning for that. We have a calendar view built into the website. So the website's really cool. Ron Cates built it. It's FileMaker back end. It's WordPress front end. It's got little triggers where you could say, send me an iCal for that session so I don't forget it. Show me how to walk to that session. All kinds of cool stuff in there. We also have an Android app that has now been completed. So you can take this FileMaker database driving a WordPress front end website, and you can capture the whole thing on Android. It's being compiled. And we're now marketing it as the best place, really, to learn rapidly emerging agentic development with FileMaker. Most of the Claris industry leaders are going to be there, at least the American ones. And that's enough. But please be there. This is, I swear to God, this is going to be memorable, if nothing else. You're going to go, that was like the coolest thing that's ever happened. We are really planning it big time this year. So please come. You need a discount, you can email me, just JONN@fullaccess.us. Again, it's JONN@fullaccess.us. Any questions, any issues, reach out to me. This is all I do anymore, is go to these meetings and plan for events. That's all I do.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, John. Last date to remember is the new Spider-Man film is on July 31st. It's very. So last slide, just thanks for everyone that joined us. And certainly, Rick, thank you for joining us and going over to tell us all about FileMaker 2026. So we appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, Rick.
And thanks for the screen, Stephen. I saw that after I presented.
Okay. Oh, and I guess it wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't share one more thing before we all go. I don't know if you got news, but after many years and failed attempts, scientists have finally grown human vocal cords in a petri dish. A lot of people aren't impressed, but I feel the results speak for themselves. All right.
Sorry, my
So-
microphone was off, so you couldn't hear me. Sorry.
All right. Again, thank you all. Thank you for Teresa for letting us use your Zoom space to all gather together. And just remember, no meeting in July, and then the August meeting will be at the end of July.
Great. Thank you.
Have fun, Kim. You're going to have a blast.
All right. Take care. All.
All right. Take
Bye.
care, everyone. Good night.